Hi, everyone. My name is Laird, and you can find out a little bit more about me at the Digital Law and Innovation website listed on the screen. That's a little student group that I co-founded and run at the University of Alberta here in Turtle Island in Canada. It's really nice to meet you as it were in this format. And I'm here to talk a little bit about ethics, AI, and the law and stories. So let's get to it. First, the disclaimers. I am not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. I'm also not an ethics expert. I'm not an information expert. And you might be wondering why I'm even here. But jokes aside, I have a background working with governments and working with nonprofits here and in other parts of the world on starting new programs and doing things that help them tweak their systems for the better. And for me, that means making them more accessible and work better for as many different people as possible. And right now, for me, this work involves technology, it involves artificial intelligence, and I think that involves ethics as well. So I hope this is the beginning of a conversation. I'm really delighted to be here. And with all that preamble, we can jump right into the talk. So it starts where law and AI meet. And this quote is a little dense, but I want to highlight it because Muriel Hildebrandt has really inspired my thinking on this. And she talks here, I'm taking it out of context a little, but it's close enough for our purposes. So she talks about technology, and in this case, we mean artificial intelligence, involving a shift to automated pattern recognition, a new paradigm in the construction of knowledge, which will fundamentally affect our lives. And that entails specific types of errors, loss of autonomy and privacy, unfair discrimination and stigmatization, and an absence of due process. Current law's articulation in the technology of the printed script is inadequate in the face of the new type of knowledge generation. And then she goes on to talk about a number of solutions. And the thing to pick out here is the intersections between artificial intelligence and the legal system are contested. And to me, and I'll hear from our legal and ethics experts on this more, I hope, in our chat, this makes it a crucial site for the practice of ethics when things get ambiguous like that. And where does it come in? So specifically, law can shape technology, who can produce it, purchase it, limiting how it can be sold, owned, etc. And technology can also shape law, shifting who can access it, what evidence might be available, how it can be processed, stored, referenced, etc. And so that influence back and forth, I suggest, and what seems to me to be true in my experience, is that will occur, that influence, according to a broader set of social norms and ideas that are not yet fully encoded, as it were, in law or in technology. And certainly my collaborations with folks like Katrina Ingram at Ethically Aligned AI and others suggest that this is the case. So this is kind of the hunch we're following. Then comes the stories part. I love this quote from Thomas King: "The truth about stories is that's all we are." And while law and technology might co-evolve, I'm most interested in the stories that we tell about AI and the law in some ways, because how legal professionals and members of the public understand their relationship to AI can both shape law and shape AI itself. Just doing a time check here. So for the scientists out there, yes, you can pinch your arm and find more flesh than stories, but Thomas King's quote here reminds me about how much our perceptions do shape our world. So you can pinch that arm and find flesh, but is it pain? Is it pleasure? Is it an imposition of privacy over which you can sue? Those are the stories that I'm talking about that shape so much of the world around us. And the stories that are often associated with artificial intelligence are about magic, they're about mystical things, they're about things we don't understand. And to me, that perpetuates an idea that only a handful of super specialized experts will ever truly understand AI, and the rest of us are here to accept it or fear it, but not necessarily understand or shape it. And that's compounded by the word intelligence, which is super value laden. It talks about human beings and their place in the world, sometimes vis-a-vis animals or others. And that sort of heavy lifting of all those laden terms is something that artificial intelligence has in common with the law, which also tends to create strong narratives that can sometimes deflect and dampen critical thinking and a sense of agency in society. So I'll footnote you out there to Rod McDonald's work for more on that. I'm happy to geek out about his work in that regard. And just to return to the picture here, Thomas King reminds us of that too, that the stories we tell about colonial history, justifications for whose laws rule different contexts and who gets to enforce law and how it's legitimized, those can seem like flat facts, and yet there are viewpoints through which we look at those facts and the stories that we tell about them, and the idea about fact and truth and story that we uphold and the viewpoints that we honor matter and change a lot about the world. So, which the picture here attests. If you can, I'll leave that as a footnote as well. We can talk more about colonization in the law. So when law and artificial intelligence both take on these heavy kind of mythic proportions and perhaps encourage us to accept or fear rather than change or shape them, what does that mean for ethics? What power might be exerted to influence their development in a way that serves society broadly? And perhaps more pointedly on this year's conference theme, what does it mean to have inclusive AI? Who defines inclusive? How do those people define inclusive? How might that be written into law? How might we encourage or insist on its development in technology? Or as my collaborator, Professor Nidhi Hegde, said yesterday, if AI is shaping our story, we aren't. And that goes for law too. So anyway, enough pontificating, time for a story. So this is a legal practitioner's story who, for the purposes of our talk, shall go by the name Jessie. And Jessie once said to me, as a young person coming up in law, that they prefer a pen and paper. And that notion, well, a valid personal preference, comes with all of these other stories about robot judges, which you can see pictured here from a TV show that's popular in North America right now, and all of these other kinds of pieces. And so I think that these stories aren't helpful, and that stories of agency and negotiation around artificial intelligence might serve us better as a society. And so to sort of test and explore that idea through funding from AI for Society that we're grateful to receive at the Digital Law and Innovation Society, lots of acronyms, sorry about that. We're working on a project about digital law primers, and that work is to not give people a full foundation in terms of the detailed technology, but give people enough information and context that they can ask good questions about how technology and artificial intelligence in particular might be used in courtrooms, might be used in their law firms or legal aid societies, might be used by police, et cetera, and sort of looking at that justice system writ large and dispel some of those myths about AI and be a little bit more intentional about the stories that we tell, and perhaps exercise judgment about the place of AI in the profession in a more intentional and widespread way, including more people in that. And yes, that pun was intended for those of you that caught it. So I think that broad education is one way to encourage inclusive artificial intelligence, inviting everyone to understand that artificial intelligence is something they can shape and set boundaries around, not just accept. So that's the first story. The second story here is sort of thinking about artificial intelligence in law and who it's good for. And the question here is, if you can access information, but you can't define it or shape it, how are you included in the use and development of artificial intelligence? What if information is a story? And you'll catch from earlier in the talk that in many ways, my work has suggested, along with many others, that information is a story. And so one of the experiments we're doing with this, I mentioned my colleague, Professor Hegde, earlier, with a little grant from EPS, University of Alberta Seed Grant Program. We're working with a number of colleagues on a project to support people to gather their own evidence and data about their interactions with perhaps police, perhaps other people in society with whom they might wish to have their interaction recorded for accountability purposes. And so that's that idea that it no longer becomes a she said, it can become here's the evidence that I have to back me up as an individual who might not otherwise have that kind of credibility to support my story when I'm in a courtroom standing across from a police person who may or may not have acted appropriately in a given situation. And so that's another tiny story that we can come back to. And so again, I'll just return to this idea where law and AI meet. I think it's a really vital, crucial site for the exercise of ethics. What does it mean to have inclusive artificial intelligence is a question that affects us in legal systems, in social systems, as technologists, and it will fundamentally affect our lives, as Muriel Hildebrandt has so presciently articulated in her work. So a truth about stories is that they do affect law and artificial intelligence as much as the other way around. At the Digital Law and Innovation Society, with many partners, we're working to enable the responsible interactions between law and technology. And for me, that means ones that benefit society at large and increase access to justice. And there goes my timer. So thank you so much for listening. I really look forward to connecting with some of you in a salon talk or by email. Ideas, questions, and comments are welcome. As you can tell, we're really in the thick of it, developing this work, playing around with ideas for the greater good, we hope, and interested in collaborating with others that are doing the same and having our work challenged and improved as we go. So thank you again, and take care.